Welcome back to another UNC Scouting Overview. I'm Tommy Ashley. Same place, same time. That's Jason Staples. Johnny T-shirt and Congruity are our sponsors. As promised, the next time you see us, we were going to talk about running backs. Well, here we are. Jason has done his assessment, done his scouting reports. Now let's talk about it. We'll start with Caleb Hood. Jason, this is a guy who I think has a wealth of talent. Just cannot, for whatever reason, stay healthy. Even in one of his best plays in his Carolina career, which was the run at Appalachian State, I guess it's been 2 years ago already, gets hurt on that play, misses time. What did you see from Caleb Hood when you were evaluating him? How can he help this North Carolina running back room?
Well, you said it. I mean, availability is the most important ability because without that, you got no other abilities, and that's been his struggle so far. What you do see when he's actually out there is a guy that has kind of prototypical size and build, 5'11", 230. He's probably a 4'6" guy. You look at that breakaway run against that you're referencing against App State. Go back and watch that play. I mean, that's what you got. That's a really good play, and that's a player who can make that play is a top flight player. Problem is he just has not been able to stay on the football field, and he's just not been, not been available enough, not been out there enough to be able to develop as the back that you want. But he's bursty. He's got a thick build. He shows enough speed at times to know that he can at least get some highlight yards down the field. He's got very good hands. I've seen that show up as a pass catcher more than once. I mean, played quarterback in high school, and normally quarterbacks have really good hands because they're touching the football all the time. Catching it in the shotgun, all that stuff. Now, he's not. He's a little more bursty than he is long speed. A long speed guy. He's not one of those striders, but that matters more for a running back. He's a guy that if he does get daylight, he can take it, and he's going to break some tackles with that size. I do think he's got a little bit of a shuffling gait, which to me suggests that he could use a little bit more hip flexor strength and front side emphasis on front side sprinting mechanics. If I want to get really technical here, but he's a guy I would have doing. There's specific exercises for hip flexors, where you put a band on the floor and get your and pull up through that with your hips and some of those sorts of things. And there's a series of those that a lot of sprinters do because you can get your posterior chain as strong as possible. But if you don't match that with hip flexor strength, you can sometimes get a little bit. You can lose some of the ability to carry your speed. And I can see that a little bit with him. I don't know if that's something that they've worked on the last year or so. We haven't really watched him run in a while because he's not been available. But early in his career, that's something that stood out. But again, he's a guy that, if he's out there, is one of the more talented backs in the conference. It's just a matter of how long can he stay healthy if he is out there. That's the problem. So right now, he's going into camp as the number 3 guy, and a guy that, comes on the field when the other two are done, basically, for the day. They're going to rotate 2 backs as their main backs, and then he becomes sort of the third back or utility back that has a role when those 2 guys are no longer needed. I do think he could also get a little bit better in terms of pass protection, but he did show significant strides in that before he got hurt again. In the prior 2 seasons. So, yeah, I mean, it basically boils down to health for him. But like I said, the talent is still there. He's still a big, strong, fast player, and that goes a long way at that position.
Indeed, Caleb Hood there. You mentioned third back. You mentioned the other 2 guys. Well, one of the other 2 is Darwin Barlow out of Southern Cal. This is a guy, we saw him in practice back in the spring, Jason. Built like a tank, not too unlike British Brooks built, but Barlow brought in, for depth, for production, and also for Hood's lack of availability at times. But what'd you see from Barlow's tape? I'll start this way. Everybody talks about how he did not play a ton at Southern Cal. He did not play a ton at Southern Cal is good for a couple reasons. Less tread off the tires, and also Southern Cal had studs in the running back room out there. What'd you see?
Well, I mean, this is a guy that looks a lot like Omarion Hampton. I mean, so 8 attempts. He had 8 carries in 2023. He averaged 10.1 yards per carry on those 8 carries. Now, that's in cleanup time against some of their lesser competition for sure. But still, you look at his numbers over his career, and he's not a whole lot. He's not behind Hampton on some of these numbers. So, and jumping the gun a little bit here to bring up Hampton's numbers a little bit. But Pro Football Focus has an elusiveness rating that I think is helpful when you're evaluating running backs. This is basically a metric that they use, missed tackles forced, yards after contact, some of these things, and then just general film stuff that goes into this to create this elusiveness rating. And generally speaking, for me, an elusiveness rating over 100 is sort of your benchmark. If you're over 100 on the elusiveness rating on Pro Football Focus, you're playing pretty good football. And actually last year I had said, basically Carolina needed to find 2 runners who can break at least 1 tackle per 4 runs and maintain an elusiveness rating over 100. That would mean they got a productive season. Well, Hampton did that. His elusiveness rating was 116.3. You know what Barlow's rating has been? In 2022, on 16 carries, his elusiveness rating was 128.3. And on 8 carries last year, it was 291.7.
Broke the chart.
Yeah. I mean, that's absurd. Now, very few guys are going to maintain that over a season. I think last year Trey Benson for Florida State was over 200 for the season, which is insane. But he got drafted high for that, right? I mean, that's rare. But you look at yards per carry after contact, right? That's an important metric. Barlow on 74 carries at TCU as a sophomore, 3.68 yards per carry after contact as a sophomore. The last 2 years at USC, 4.06 yards per carry on 16 carries and 5.25 yards after contact per carry on those 8 carries. Those are really, really good numbers. 8 carries, 5 missed tackles forced. 16 carries, 6 missed tackles forced. All of those are really good. And then when you pop in the tape, that all just sticks out. The biggest thing is the thing that stands out most when you stick the film on and you start watching is he's got terrific balance, contact balance, and a really strong core. He's one of those guys where when he takes contact, he doesn't tend to get knocked off balance very easily. He just kind of sheds and he takes a lot of sort of off-axis hits. He does a good job of setting himself up for off-axis hits and then just sheds those really well. Doesn't get knocked off balance very easy. Thick build, very similar build. I mean, 6 foot 220. Omarion Hampton, 6 foot 220. Very similar kind of player as Hampton and pretty instinctive runner. And you put all that together and that's high quality and really good burst. The thing that I think Hampton has on him comparatively is I think Hampton's faster in the long run. And, the long speed, the sprinter speed, the 100-meter type speed, I think Hampton's a little faster than Barlow. Otherwise, they're very much, carbon clones. And look, if you could get a carbon copy of 85% or 90% of Omarion Hampton's game and make him your other running back, if you're Mac Brown, where do I sign? Right? That's Barlow. He could have a little more wiggle, but he's a good route runner. He actually, in my opinion, was a better pass protector than Hampton was last year in, limited opportunities. This is a guy that's going to play. I think you give him, 130 plus carries, and you split the load much more. And if I'm Omarion Hampton, I am, some people might go, well, how happy would Hampton be about that? If I'm Omarion Hampton, I am thrilled next year if I don't have 1,500 yards, because instead of 254 carries, I've got 170.
Yep.
That'd be terrific, because I want to go into the NFL with more mileage left on my tires. I don't want all that tread worn off. I want to be as effective and efficient as I can be and be able to run as hard as I can all season and split time all 50-50 with their guy that allows me to do that and stay healthy and go into the NFL with more tread left on those tires. Where do I sign? And to me, Barlow does that. And Barlow's a guy that, if he gets the opportunities, I think has flexed the skills to get on some radars next year if he does what I think he might.
Yeah, it is a luxury to have North Carolina. Everybody's talked about Carter and Williams. Now you have Hampton and Barlow. Let's talk about Omarion. Obviously, freshman year, a lot of people said he had some flaws. He ran with his head down and all that. Made some plays. Other plays were left on the table. Last year, Jason, I'd love to hear your discussion here. He didn't leave too many plays on the table last year. He took them. And, folks will always remember the fumbles against Clemson. Well, one of those guys that ran him down is going to make a lot of money one day. But Hampton's ability to get better and just be the workhorse for North Carolina for Matt Brown, he and Barlow could be the ticket this year to a pretty strong season.
Yeah, that Clemson cornerback who ran him down is not only going to make a lot of money someday, but he was drafted pretty high this year. Wiggins was drafted in the first round after running a 4.2 at the NFL Combine. So that explains why he ran him down. Not many people running away from Wiggins. As a freshman, Hampton, my scouting report on him was that, all the physical tools are there, but it looks like he's running with his eyes closed half the time. Right? I mean, there were times where he just run right into the backs of guys and just, head down, trying to get that body lean and all that. He just didn't have the rhythm in that. Last year, from game 1 till the end of the season, when he got his hands on the football, his eyes and his feet were synced up. He was in balance. He consistently hit the right crease. And like you said, he didn't leave a whole lot on the field. I mean, 67 missed tackles forced on 254 carries. That's a missed tackle forced on about 26% of carries. And when you're getting that, and then you get into the open field, he ran 10.7 in the 100 meters in high school. And as a freshman, he didn't really have an opportunity to flash that because he was running into guys' backs all the time. Last year, there were a lot of opportunities where he managed to get to the second level because he'd shake that one tackle. And he's one of those guys where if he can beat that initial guy, if he beats that first guy, now it's trouble, because he's got enough speed. He will find a crease and he's going to be able to go a long way. He had carries over 10 yards 35 times last year, right? So a big play waiting to happen at the running back position. Also was a reliable receiver. 29 catches last year. You know how many drops he had?
1 maybe?
0.
You blinked out, but you said 0.
0. That's right. That's pretty rare for a running back. So give him credit there too. I still think there's some warts. He led the country in yards from scrimmage last year, certainly the ACC, but or in rushing as well. But my read is that he had some trouble in pass protection at times. There were some pressures on May that were the fault of Hampton. He missed, or at times he was maybe just a beat slow in recognizing where he needed to be. And then there were other times where, and this to me is the thing he really has to work on coming into this year, is being a little stickier in pass protection. So he a lot of times would make that initial contact really well, but the better linebackers, better blitzers against him would take that initial contact, kind of bounce back a little bit, and then shed, and then all of a sudden they're on your quarterback. If he can get a little stickier in pass pro and keep his feet moving through that contact and really mirror after that, then that really is the next big thing that he's got to fix. The other thing is the fumbles. I mean, he had 2 fumbles in 2022 and 3 in 2023, and a couple of those were super costly. And he's just got to make sure that that ball is your life, son. And he's got to make sure that doesn't hit the ground this year. Other than that, I mean, you can make a case that he's the best back in the ACC returning. He's certainly the most productive and one of the most talented. And again, you don't have many guys that are 220 pounds that are running sub 10.8, close to 10.70 in the 100 meters. So, legit NFL prospect and a guy that should play, multiple years on Sundays as a starting running back there. Huge luxury. He's going to get an opportunity to be the bell cow. Again, if I'm one of their coaches though, if I'm running the offense, I want that 254 carries closer to 175 or so, with Barlow getting 140, 150, so that those guys both stay healthier and both stay fresher going into the second half of the season, and that Hampton is fresher going into fourth quarters. And the other thing that's interesting to me, I'm curious to see how much they have both of those guys on the field at the same time this year. Because, if you want to really pound the rock, both of those guys have shown they can catch the football really well out of the backfield. And how many teams really want to match up with big personnel and have 2 running backs that they got to deal with? Do you have packages that you feel like you can do some different things with them on that? If that's the case, they're both going to have to get a little better as run blockers. Neither's really distinguished himself as that. But it's something I would be looking at, because they're 2 of your best 11 on the offensive side. So, sometimes you might want them both on the field as a way to have some options. And if you do, who wins the quarterback job? Right? If you're gonna do a little more dual threat stuff at the quarterback position, if Harrell's doing some read option type stuff, if you have both on the field, you can do some veer stuff with those guys, and that gets real interesting. Some veer, some inverted veer with some pitch option type stuff that starts to look really interesting. Curious to see what they do with him, because I think they're really happy with Barlow. I think he came in and was better than they even thought he'd be, and now they know they've got 2 guys that they can lean on, and they want to do that. So it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it's a luxury to be able to turn around and hand the ball to a couple Mack trucks, and they both built like that. I mean, Hampton's been that way forever. Barlow brings that too. When you looked at the running back contributors or other contributors, you got Davion Gauss, freshman. Major Bird switched jerseys and made some good plays. You would like to think that Barlow and Hampton and Caleb Hood, if he can stay available, will get the mass amount. But what'd you think of the other guys, Jason, that I mentioned?
Well, I mean, they're competent, and the thing is, none of those guys are going to be a major weakness for you. None of those guys are going to be a problem for you if they have to play an ACC play. But you don't have those other guys are definitely a tick below what you got with Hampton and Barlow for sure. Gauss impressed, for sure at different points. Bird had a couple runs that stood out in the spring game for sure, with being able to absorb contact and break some tackles. So, you feel good about those guys, but the fact of the matter is where they are right now with this roster, they came into last year. You remember last year, they said, look, we shared carries to too many guys the year before. Nobody was able to get into any sort of rhythm. We got to find our guys. We got to really ideally identify the 2 guys that are going to get the bulk of the carries. And that's what happened. Omarion Hampton became the clear one, and then British Brooks got the majority of the rest. And then everybody else sort of it was table scraps. And I think that's what they're going to do this year as well. It's going to be Hampton and Barlow, and then, Hood is kind of the next guy up, and then you're starting to feed some of the young guys and get them reps. And ideally, those guys get a bunch of reps in practice, because you don't want your 1A and your 1B to get a bunch of mileage run off of them in practice either. I mean, to me in camp, you have those guys do enough to make sure they're not collecting any rust. So you don't completely bubble wrap them, but you have them on a pitch count. You have both of them on a pitch count, and you have them taking the reps that are going to be meaningful for them, and beyond that, you don't. Get the young guys more time in camp. Get the young guys some reps during the season at times, but I mean, I think you're going to run a 1A 1B situation, and not a bunch of other guys getting a lot of reps at the running back position unless something disastrous happens.
Final thoughts here. Where does this running back room stack up in the ACC, you think?
I mean, it's top 3 for sure, and it's based on production. Hampton's the most productive returning running back in the conference. So, I mean, you can make a case for this being the number 1 running back room in the conference. I'm not sure it's number 1, but I certainly don't know who I'd put above them. So, it's definitely, to me, in the top 3, and I think has maybe the best arguments for number 1 going into the season in terms of running back rooms.
That is Jason Staples. This has been the running backs, UNC Scouting Overview. We've got a couple of positions left: tight end, wide receiver, quarterback. Jason said who's going to be the starting quarterback earlier in this show. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as these scouting reports on the Tar Pit Premium message boards progress. Stay tuned there. Stay tuned to Jason Staples' hard work. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina. Football season will be here before you know it, folks, and we'll be counting the days and making the days count with all these scouting reports. Thanks to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity, and thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Tommy.